countdown to the last comic shop in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Swinging in to another week of the Last Comic Shop Podcast!
Yes, we are crawling around our web of comics, opening them up to newbies to make them understand that they don't need to buy this or read it. Really appreciate it.
Wow, we are keeping the lights on for the oldies that know better. But here we are. It's Maximum Carnage week here at the Last Comic Shop. Thanks, Andy.
Hey, I want the fans out there to know that I am delivering this for you. For all those young folks, those Gen Zers, those late millennials that didn't have to suffer through reading Maximum Carnage when it was coming out weekly on the newsstands like some of us oldie fogies. But still, for some bizarre reason, have fond memories of this event. Like, they're like, oh my gosh, do you know Maximum Carnage? They should make a movie out of that. They should do this. Should they? We'll see. I'm the host with the most, Andy Larson. I'm joined by Chad Smith and Jay Scott on this wrapping up of the Merry Marvel March Society. And to put that capstone on this wonderful month where we've reviewed a bunch of Marvel comics here at the Last Comic Shop, I thought we would provide ourselves with a treat of some sorts by reading a series that is, again, very, very famous. I mean, a lot of folks know about this 90s event called Maximum Carnage. They know about Carnage, they know about Venom, they know about the symbiotes, they know what happens, sort of, or maybe they don't. But we decided on this week to read the 14 issues that make up this story arc, which I mean, Chad, he can tell me whether I'm wrong or not, but this is one of the few events that was like Spider-Man specific, other than maybe Clone Saga.
No, you're wrong. For the most part, in the Spidey book, stories would be self-contained. You would have a few exceptions, like Kraven's Last Hunt, that went throughout the different Spider-Man books. But then whenever you would have things like The Return of the Sinister Six, that was often Amazing Spider-Man. For the most part, Spider-Man was the opposite of the Superman titles at the time, where the Superman titles had their little symbols at the top, and then each of the 4 books would rotate one chapter in a story. That's not how the Spider books did it. Traditionally, it was Amazing Spider-Man had their storylines, Spectacular had theirs, Web of Spider-Man dealt with their own thing, and then this story actually introduced a new book, the Spider-Man Unlimited series.
Yeah.
So more of an anthology sort of thing.
On nicer paper, it was the beginning of high-end comicking.
It was.
The death of Chad's beloved newsprint.
Oh,
It is amazing, though, because for some bizarre reason, they thought, we have 4 Spider-Man titles, but we need more. I think they had 5 at this time, because they could have still been putting out Marvel Tales. I think Marvel Tales was still there, featuring reprints of Spider-Man. I'm not 100% sure whether it wrapped up by 1994, which, is the year this came out, but
I feel like it would have been around then, not a little bit earlier.
Absolutely. And speaking to Chad's point, before we get into the 10-cent synopsis and the creators of this, Chad, do you feel like this was kind of a reaction to what was going on at DC at the time, with the fact that, like, you had things like the death of Superman, you had Nightfall, you had all of the different Batman and Superman titles, even like Green Lantern, like they had the Emerald Dawn, Emerald Twilight, like right. all those bigger storylines that they basically, you had to buy every book in order to understand what was going on. Do you think this was Marvel's reaction to that?
Honestly, it feels like that, in the fact, the whole brainchild behind the Batman Nightfall was, the readers want a darker, more aggressive Batman. Let's give it to them and show them why they're wrong. And that sort of seems like, okay, the readers want Carnage. They love these symbiotes. This is what they want. Let's give it to them in this over-the-top extreme format. And what gets me is, as a Spider-Man fan, Part 5 of this series occurs in Spectacular Spider-Man 201, which longtime Spidey fans will know. Spectacular Spider-Man 200 was the death of Harry Osborn. That was probably the high watermark in terms of 1990s Spider-Man storytelling, the culmination of all the James DeMatteis and Sal Buscema had been working on, The Child Within, and the whole Harry Osborn saga that dated back into the 70s. Finally wrapped up in issue 200 in this, grand emotional event, and then Maximum Carnage started.
Oh, well, without further ado, I think we should start talking about Maximum Carnage. We do have a movie review later on in the program, so let's get to that. So, Chad, you'd mentioned J.M. DeMatteis or J.M. DeMatteis, however you pronounce it. He was on a Spectacular Spider-Man with Sal Buscema, but who else was involved with crafting this 14-part epic?
Yeah, you had plenty of cooks in the kitchen here. On the Spider-Man Unlimited chapters, those were 1 and 14, you had Tom DeFalco and then Ron Lim. On the Spectacular Spider-Man chapters, you had J.M. DeMatteis and Sal Buscema. You had Terry Kavanagh writing the Adjectiveless Spider-Man book with Tom Lyle. For Web of Spider-Man, that was Terry Kavanagh and Alex Saviuk. And then on the Amazing Spider-Man, you had David Michelini and Mark Bagley.
Yeah.
And then we had a host of inkers, including Sal, Sam DeLosa, Randy Eberlin, Scott Hanna, Don Hudson, Al Milgrom, Jim Sanders III. With letters, we have Steve Dittrow, Chris Eliopoulos, Rick Parker, and Joe Rosen. And on colorists, we had Joe Andriani, Jim Houston, John Callis, Chris Mathis, Erica Moran, Bob Sharon, Kevin Tinsley, and Neil Yomtov.
These are all familiar folks to me, except for one, Tom Lyle.
Oh, he did the Robin miniseries.
Okay.
Robin 2, Robin 3, Cry the Huntress.
All right. Well, maybe that's why, because I wasn't a big DC fan. But anyways. And speaking of some of those creators, by the way, if you want to hear some interesting interviews with some of them, we do have an interview with Alex Saviuk on a previous episode of The Last Comic Shop in our archives, as well as Scott Hanna. But speaking of archiving things, let's go ahead and get that 10-cent synopsis from J.A. Scott. I don't know, was this the first time you actually sat down and read this, J.A.?
Yes, it was.
Buddy.
Anyways, we're 6 years into the Peter Parker MJ marriage, and they're still in the sometimes married people fight stage. And she's now smoking cigarettes. And Peter Parker's parents are back. Clones or something. I don't know. I didn't get that part.
Should mention Smokin' MJ. That was a Spectacular Spider-Man running plotline. Peter Parker's parents return. That was happening in Amazing Spider-Man. Carry on.
Okay.
Oh, wait. Let me pause. Carry On was actually a Spectacular Spider-Man guy. He shows up later. Okay. Go ahead.
So, this starts out by Carnage breaking out of jail, and in the midst of his breakout, he runs into Shriek, who then proclaims her love for him, and they break out together and just go on a massive killing spree, because it turns out that Shriek is influencing his emotions and mood a bit, but he's also crazy. Just all he wants to do is kill people. And during this killing streak around New York City, with lots of people dying, kind of gets glossed over sometimes, the amount of death that is involved. You get all these randos show up, like the aforementioned Carrion, the doppelganger Spider-Man from Infinity War, because, okay, we have Demo Goblin, which is like Hobgoblin, but a demon.
Yeah, the Demogoblin and Doppelganger, those were both from Web of Spider-Man. They had just gone through a whole big thing with Venom and Ghost Rider and Blaze and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, go ahead.
Venom is now in San Francisco, but he finds out that Carnage is out, so he goes back because he wants to kill Carnage.
And this was after the Venom Lethal Protector miniseries that showed his exploits out there in San Fran. We
get Black Cat showing up in what's got to be the ultimate 90s edition of her costume. Like, seriously, how she kept anything in, jumping around. Wiggle wrong, and you think something's going to pop out. Who else shows up? Captain America, just randomly. Not the rest of the Avengers, but Captain America is there to help. Iron Fist to recite some of the worst dialogue ever written for his character. Firestar in a very unfortunate 90s version of a costume that probably people regret making to this day. Everyone went through the whole baggy pants phase.
Hey, that's
This
coming
was her
back. I
Denko
heard.
genes.
Flares are, evidently.
There was the dude who's like half robot, half
Yeah,
corpse.
Deathlock.
Deathlock.
Just awful. Awful
And don't-
character.
Don't forget Cloak and Dagger, then just Cloak, then Cloak and Dagger.
Yeah, Cloak and Dagger.
I mean, to defend, some of these people make sense, right? Like Venom, yeah. Black Cat, yeah. Cloak and Dagger, huge allies all through the 80s with Amazing Spider-Man. Firestar, an amazing friend. Even Captain America, I feel, given the history of Spider-Man and Captain America, that one makes sense. And Morbius, it's Morbin time.
And Nightwatch. Don't forget Nightwatch.
Yes, and
along with Morbius.
Nightwatch.
Although I thought that was just Spawn. Because, like, I was
I
trying to
thought it
figure
was
out.
Spawn too.
Yeah, it was just Spawn. Just get it out and be done with it.
Why is Spawn showing up? Why is he here?
I did like that Morbius would show up for like half an issue and then disappear for 2 issues because it was morning. And then he'd come out at night again. And you're like, oh yeah, he's in this book again.
Yeah. And he had like some strange feud with Demo Goblin. Yeah.
So to finish my 10 cents, because I think we're spending a lot of time on the people that were in it, the whole plot is essentially Carnage and this gang of ne'er-do-wells go around killing people, and Spider-Man enlists a whole bunch of allies to help him stop them from killing people. That's the plot. There's no MacGuffin. There's no grand master plan. The plan is to kill people and let's stop them from killing people for 14 issues.
Right.
At one point, Deathlock goes into the internet for something. That was a play on there.
And Shriek, she's manipulating all of the emotions of people all throughout New York City, making them barbaric, and lots of other killings going on and rioting and all this other stuff. And and even at the time, because again, this is I have not read this story for probably at least 25 years. I read it as it was coming out. Maybe I read it slightly again in my mid-20s, but I haven't read it since then. But one thing is true, even through all of those readings, is that there is no reason why this needs to be 14 parts. This was like 6 issues tops, maybe like, a bi-monthly title. That's all this story could contain. But yet it's still 14 parts. Every time you feel like these two forces are just going to fight each other and just get done with the conflict, everyone's like, no, I just got to go back to my house for a little while. I'm going to go over here and have some drama with Mary Jane, and I'm not sure whether I can kill Carnage, but we're going to talk about that for a couple more issues. And
yeah, how about Firestar, with all her concern about killing someone, she's hitting him with microwaves. You're not even supposed to stand by the microwave, Firestar. You're killing all kinds of people.
But I seriously though, I'm going to challenge everybody on this show. Like, I think we all agree that Maximum Carnage is not good. But any other podcast out there can just come onto a show and just trash a book for 20 minutes. I want to challenge both of you that this is a book that's not really the greatest, but is extremely popular and extremely well known. Why is that the case? J.A. is a first-time reader. Why did this appeal? Why would this be something that people would remember?
This came out in 93 into 94. It's definitely peak 90s comic booking. You have all these just rando crazy characters showing up. There's a lot of action. So I guess who cares about a story or a plot when you can just have lots of fisticuffs? And there's a lot of that. It's almost like every issue is trying to top the previous issue. So I got into a point, okay, who are we going to see next issue? Is Thanos going to show up? What's going on here? There was a bit of anticipation about where they would go, and they never let you down. While you're in there, it's like a roller coaster. It's a bit of a ride. You don't know what you're getting around the next bend. No, it's Iron Fist. I totally did not see that one coming at all.
All right, Chad. Again, I'm not going to say well remembered, but remembered by lots of comic book. Did he freeze?
No, he's not saying anything because
freeze.
he's.
the dumbest fucking question I've ever heard. They're all terrible. No! Maybe the defense is there's a video game out there. There was a beat 'em up for the Super Nintendo and the Genesis, because this plot is the plot of a video game. A 90s, go around, punch a garbage can and get a turkey or an apple, and then keep going and punching and kicking more people sort of video game. That's what the plot of this story is. And you want to compare it to the Clone Saga. The Clone Saga, at least, no, that was bad too. No. These are dark times, man. We're coming off of the Harry Osborn stuff, and that was so good. And then everything from this point forward was it was bad. I mean, you had Peter Parker's parents. You show me a good story involving Peter Parker's parents, and that'd be the first time someone showed me a good story involving the parents of Peter Parker. They had come back, they were clones, but then it was a whole Alistair Smythe thing.
No, it was Harry. It was Harry Osborn making the clones. Come on.
Anyway, it wasn't good. It's bad. It's just all bad.
There's no defendable part. There's no reason why this should be as popular as it is.
But that's the thing, is this is where you take the talented people, and I firmly believe I'll defend James DeMatteis, I'll defend Sal Buscema, I'll defend Dave Michelini. They have written some wonderful Spider-Man stories. They are capable of great storytelling. But then you get some folks in here like, no, we need to make this big dumb thing to appeal to the masses and give the people what they want. And this is what you get out of it. This is where you stop letting people be creative and tell their own story and shoehorn them into a plot and be like, all right, figure it out. And it's sad because you're watching talented people have to suffer through this. Like, there's not consistency throughout here. This isn't someone's passion project. This is just corporate shrill. Is that the word? Dribble? Chill?
No,
I will say that I was a big fan of when the Spectacular Spider-Man issues did roll around. Because I feel like JM did try to class up the joint a little bit. He is a talented writer, so like you would have some of those internal struggles with a lot of his issues. Spider-Man's like, yeah, we're going to kill Carnage. Go ahead and do it, Firestar. And then at the last second, he's like, no, Firestar, don't do it. And then Venom's like, huh? And I was just like, this is good stuff. I remember fondly the David Michelini, Mark Bagley issues where I really did forget how much I love Mark Bagley's art, especially at this time. Like, I really did like it. And then there's like rando, scenes of Mary Jane and bra and panties for no good reason at all other than just rando as Venom falls on her floor. And I enjoyed all that. I still am and was disappointed in the Web of Spider-Man issues. Those ones... not so good, yo.
Well, it's coming off of having Jerry Conway and Alex Saviuk were a great team. And the inker Don Hudson here, he kind of muddles Saviuk's art. And so it goes from being less of a John Romita pastiche to just this murky, muddy, it wasn't a great fit for me. Right.
But it was nostalgic to revisit this particular era. Some of the rando guys that showed up are just... why? Like, why are we using these people? The rest of Marvel was like, no, you can't use any of the other good people. You can't use the good villains. Like, we're not going to let you do that. You have to use these terrible villains or these terrible heroes, right?
As someone who doesn't have a lot of skin in the Spider-Man game, so to speak, I didn't mind that they were all rando because the whole story was rando. So it sort of, through random wrongs make a right a bit. I thought it was like, if you're going to go that crazy, you might as well do it with characters I have no care for. Because at least on the Rogues Gallery side of things, I did like seeing the Spider-Man doppelganger because every time I saw him, I got a little smile because it reminded me of Infinity War, which was also a crazy 6-issue crossover. And then you had all the Infinity War spin-off crossover event. So, yeah, the problem is I thought they had all of these things, all of these characters and situations, some of it forced on them by where Spider-Man was at the time. So, Peter Parker's parents and MJ smoking and all these things that were sort of going on in the background, plus all these random characters that they've included But the whole genesis of the story, the whole idea that there's just Carnage and these bad guys going around killing people for no other reason than they want to kill people, is the main detriment of the entire story. Carnage never gets fleshed out. He doesn't have any dimension to him. He's this one-dimensional rage machine.
Well, there's also the creepy family dimension where he and Shriek decide to play mommy and daddy and all the rest of these guys.
Oh,
like,
right.
yeah, sure, whatever.
And something's going on there that you don't want to ask. Is that like a wink, wink, nod, nod, or not?
Like, this was kind of like that Natural Born Killers movie by Oliver Stone, where they're going on this kill fest murder spree, and that's cool. You know, later on in the show, we'll talk about Woody Harrelson playing Carnage. And I'm like, actually, that's kind of inspired casting. But I agree, J.A., even when you find out, like, Carnage was abused as a kid, and, Shriek was abused as a kid. You're like, I don't really care. Because, like, there's no reason to care. They're just killing people. I don't really care about this.
I did like the whole, where's Dagger gone? But she can't be completely gone because Cloak can't teleport without Dagger, and he's still teleporting. So that was kind of a throwaway in one thought bubble. But you would think that Cloak would know that and figure out, why can't I still teleport? Maybe Dagger hasn't gone. Just saying. It's always good to see Cloak and Dagger. I think they're often underutilized in the Marvel Universe.
Well, there you go. Well, let's get into our ratings for Maximum Carnage, the 14-part miniseries. We do have a movie review to get to. So, J.A., what's our 1 out of 4 scale for this?
1 out of 4 plot devices?
No.
Like
no.
the Alpha Wave
devices. There weren't any plot devices. No, okay. I'll go. 1 out of 4 random bad guys.
Carrion was like the ultimate one.
He just floats up out of a manhole cover. Literally floats up out of a manhole cover. That is totally a video game.
That's all this was.
Let's start off with Chad. He's saying it was just a video game. What's your rating, buddy?
Yeah, I hate it so much. And it makes me sad because there are so many talented people involved. We were talking off air about Ron Lim. So many of us loved Ron Lim, the Silver Surfer. I don't think he was a fit in the Spider-Man universe, though. Mark Bagley had such a storied run on it. Amazing Spider-Man and then Ultimate Spider-Man. And he's still kicking around with Dan Slott on other Spider-Man books. Like, he's been making it with Spider-Man for 40 years and doing an excellent job of it. Sal. There's so many great writers and artists that worked on these books, so I can't give it nothing, but I can't give it much. So I'm going to say 1 out of 4 senseless killing. No, what was the scale? 1 out of 4
bad guys.
Chocolate emojis. What? 1 out of 4
random bad guys.
Random bags of trash. No, 1 out of 4 random bad guys is my rating.
All right. I'll go next. I'm going to go a little bit higher than Chad. Again, there were some interesting... No, they weren't really interesting. I enjoyed this, though, because, again, it was an opportunity, like listening to an old Pearl Jam album or something. I just was going back to my youth. I was 14 again, and the things that I liked about the series when I was 14, like the art on some of the issues, was still something that rang true even... some, 30 years later. Some of the writing that I liked, again, I really did feel like JM did kind of class up the joint with his issues. Like, you could tell he was writing them, and there was a gravitas to some of his language. There's a scene where Peter Parker's all broken down. He's got broken ribs, and he goes and sees Aunt May, and it's a really nice scene. And it's counterpointed with his dad at the time and how his dad hates all people because he's going through PTSD or something because he was in a Russian prison camp or something. I don't know, but there was a couple good scenes in that. And then you got Black Cat in the background, and although she's with Flash Thompson, she still has, this thing with Spider-Man underneath the surface a little bit, which is kind of neat. It is not as bad as the Clone Saga. I'll just say that. So I'm going to say a 1.75. Almost average. There's some issues that are average. They're pretty decent for 90s Spider-Man that you were buying once a month. J.A.,
Yeah, I mean, peak 90s, as we mentioned. I'm just on the page where Firestar comes in, and I can't blame these artists for that costume. I'm sure that costume existed before Maximum Carnage. It's a bad costume. I mean, we're talking a bomber jacket a la Rogue and yellow glasses, red gloves and boots, a black leotard with red and yellow on the arms. Just, she had an all-time classic outfit. And how many years did they put her in this derivative dreck of a costume?
It was a long time.
Yeah, she was at least through the Kurt Busiek Avengers. She was in that costume.
Oh, it's a bad costume. Anyways. Oh, and we forgot to mention Molten Man shows up randomly again. So yeah, it was. It's not very good. It's 90s excess. It's sort of a convoluted plot and not much of a story, but you read it, I guess, for how crazy it is and how off the rails. I don't know. I mean, it's like a 1. Honestly, it's 10 issues too long. Maybe even 12 issues too long.
Wow.
Maybe even 13 issues too long. I mean, seriously, the plot you could have told in a single issue. And what happens to Doppelganger at the end anyways? Does he go away?
He's dead, isn't he? I think
Does he ever show up after that?
Turns up, J.A., he did die for a long, long time, but then showed up years later in Carnage #1. He becomes the Kenny of the Marvel Spider Universe, where he just keeps getting killed and resurrected and killed and resurrected. That he eventually reunites with Carnage and Shriek, and they form a cult to worship Null. There you go.
Wonder if is that a Donny Cates idea?
That I don't know.
They should have got rid of Demo Goblin too. Man, I hated Demo Goblin. I was like, oh man, I don't even get a good Green Goblin version anymore. I got to get Demo Goblin. That's awful.
I guess. Oh, and we didn't mention, like, Shriek's got white skin, so that's also a very cleavage. There's a lot of cleavage costumes in this book.
Yes.
Oh, yeah,
I mean, Black Cat's costume goes down to her navel. Like,
so does Shriek's. They're equal but opposite, and both bad.
What I love is, like, no one's going to not know it's a Black Cat because she has those little black outlines around her eyes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Felicia, that's really going to hide your identity.
Nobody's looking at her eyes.
That's awful. But one thing that's not awful is more of the last comic shop. And we'll be right back with more of our Carnage Spectacular with a Venom movie review. Stay tuned.
Hey, it's Mikey Wood, frequent Last Comic Shop guest and collector. And as a collector, I'm always in need of boards, bags, long boxes, and more to house all those comics. That's why I use promo code LCSPOD to get 10% off my orders at bcwsupplies.com. Not only does it get me a discount on BCW's already low prices, but I know using LCSPOD at checkout is another way I can show my support to the Last Comic Shop podcast and their continuing mission to bring fans together under that big comic book tent. So if you're in need of comic book supplies, head out to bcwsupplies.com and use promo code LCSPOD today. That's LCSPOD.
Hello, Last Comic Shop listeners. This is John from Part-Time Comics. You may have heard of our great series Drumsticks of Doom or Child Possession Services, but we have a new series coming out in 2024, LCS. A series of global catastrophes has left life on Earth decimated and made comic collecting a huge disaster. Follow a group of survivors as they run the Last Comic Shop. You can find more information on any of these books at linktree/part-time comics. That's part-time comics with an X.
And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. And after all that talk about Maximum Carnage, we got another little golem to bring us a movie here, a little sneaky preview of our upcoming movie Mayhem. But this one's in March. So we are going to be tackling the 2021 film directed by that particular golem, Andy Serkis. It is Venom, Let There Be Carnage. J.A., can you give us the who's-its involved in the Venom, Let There Be Carnage 2021 action sci-fi adventure?
Yes, as you said, this was directed by Andy Serkis. on a screenplay from Kelly Marshall. The story by Tom Hardy and Kelly Marshall. Tom Hardy played Eddie Brock and Venom, did the voice of Venom as well. Michelle Williams is Anne Weying. Naomi Harris as Shriek, the aforementioned from the Maximum Carnage series. Reed Scott played Dan Lewis, a lawyer. We had Stephen Graham as Patrick Mulligan, and like maybe a slight cameo as Toxin at the very end. I don't know. And Woody Harrelson as Cletus Cassidy Carnage. And I forgot, additionally, you had Peggy Lou reprising her role as the convenience store owner, Mrs. Chen, who has a thing for Venom.
Add all those folks together, mix them up, and then, Sandy, why don't you tell us what happens when there be carnage?
All right. Well, here's your 10-cent synopsis. And really, there's not really a dime worth of plot in this movie. It picks up sometime after the original Venom movie ended, in which Eddie Brock and Venom have now decided they're going to be losers together and making a mess of Eddie Brock's apartment. Cletus Cassidy decides he wants to be Eddie Brock's friend? ? He's killed a lot of people, and he invites Eddie Brock to do some last interview before he's going to be executed. And pushes some of Eddie Brock's buttons, Venom's buttons, whatever. And I don't know, there's some biting involved, and somehow Cletus gets a symbiote and becomes Carnage. And then he breaks out of prison, and he wants to go find his long-lost love, who is Shriek. Who's at Ravenloft Asylum for the criminally superpowered?
Ravencroft, not Ravenloft.
Like okay. Lara Croft.
But she's there, and Carnage breaks her out, and then they decide to get married and kidnap Eddie Brock's former girlfriend, and then there's a big fight in a church. And that's it.
Well, it's because they all want to kill someone that did them wrong. She wants to kill the cop, Cletus wants to kill Eddie Brock, and Carnage wants to kill Venom.
Yeah. Look, I'll say this. The best thing about this movie is the fact that it's only like 90 minutes long. I felt like it was not so much a movie, but a glorified episode of a TV show.
It's the Odd Couple. It's the Odd Couple.
Yeah.
Action scenes. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say the best part was that it was only 90 minutes long. That was a good thing. I liked the whole interplay between Tom Hardy and Venom. Tom Hardy and Tom Hardy, essentially. I thought that was good. I thought that the writing was snappy. It was witty. It was funny. I found myself laughing out loud. I assume it's for some... I mean, no, it's Sony. Sony owns the rights. Why isn't Venom shooting webs and swinging around? Is it because he hasn't been introduced to the Spider-Man stuff yet?
Yeah, he doesn't have a spider. He doesn't have web shooters. Yeah, I have to believe it's because he doesn't have anything to do with Spider-Man at this point.
Well, no, because they have that thing about the hive mind and all the symbiotes know things. And
I thought it was that he doesn't do the web swinging because there were a couple big fights with like cool CGI stuff, but like actually that's kind of few and far between in this movie. Like again, like it looked like a TV show. There were like minimal actors, minimal stuff going on, 4 locations. And again, I'm glad that there's that Tom Hardy Venom interaction because that's always fun. And that's what saved the last movie too. It didn't really seem like a movie to me. Do you kind of get what I'm saying, Chad?
Well, I think your standards might be too high. I think you had some very great actors participating in this film. Michelle Williams, everybody knows, not only was she Oscar-worthy talent, she's from Dawson's Creek. Woody Harrelson, he's got his Oscar bait out there, and he was on Cheers. Tom Hardy was in the best of the Mad Max movies. He got to be Mad Max and let Furiosa outshine him. But you have these great actors here, and they are slumming it here in this picture, but they're having fun. I didn't think anybody did a particularly bad job. I like the relationship between Cletus Cassidy and Shriek. I didn't think that Woody Harrelson was just phoning it in. Like he seemed like he came to play. But I do agree that those moments weren't nearly as entertaining as the relationship between Eddie Brock and the symbiote. And so Tom Hardy and Tom Hardy, That is the milkshake that brings you to the yard in these movies. That's the part that you're having fun with. And I will say, on like an action movie scale, I kept waiting for that thing that you could do with the symbiotes that you couldn't do in any other movie. That didn't happen. This was just a B-level action movie, but it was fun. It was good for what it was. You need to set the bar real low. Don't forget, just like Venom 1, real low. But if you do, you can have a good time.
Yeah, I mean, if I had any critical notes to say about this movie, it would probably be that Naomi Harris's Shriek character was a bit too close to Naomi Harris's Calypso character from the Pirates of the Caribbean. They sort of were the same person. She essentially played the same role in both.
Yeah, who cares? It's Venom. Nobody gives a shit.
But I did love, all the interactions between Tom Hardy and Michelle Williams and Venom and Michelle Williams and even Dan were great. And it was only 90 minutes long. It was a fun movie. I thought I was going to hate it, and I actually enjoyed it a lot more than probably it deserved.
Well, I'm not saying that I didn't enjoy it. I'll say that. I liked some of the fight sequences between Venom and Carnage, even though they were just CGI slugfest. It still was kind of cool. I liked Woody Harrelson. I don't know. He was just chewing scenery sometimes, and you were just like, all right, fine. I love when Venom goes to that club and he gets up on stage and he's like, everybody should like aliens. And
yeah.
You should be yourself. And he was so proud of himself. I wish Eddie could have seen me. And it was I was like, aw. But yeah. I can't get away from the fact it didn't seem like a movie. Maybe this was because it was shot during like COVID or whatever. There weren't really crowd scenes.
Can I channel my inner symbiote and once again just say, it's Venom, who gives a shit?
This guy.
All right, well, let's get to ratings. I guess we don't have to spend a lot of time on this. What is our 1 out of 4 scale for Venom? There may be Carnage, or will be Carnage.
Let there be Carnage, right?
Let there be Carnage, yes.
1 out of 4 brains, because the whole movie was Venom wanting to eat some brains. I need brains.
And he eats the chickens instead. Chickens. We're not going to eat those 2 chickens. They're my friends.
Were they Laurel and Hardy? What were the chickens' names?
I think it was Laverne and Shirley. Was it Laverne and Shirley or Ozzie and Harriet or something?
Sonny and Cher.
Sonny and Cher. Yeah, but that's part of the fun of this movie. There's so many just dumb, fun parts. Jay, we were talking about this. When Venom sees Carnage for the first time, his reaction, do you remember?
Yes. He's like, oh, that's a red one. We're going away.
Prepare to die. And by die, I mean us. We are going to die. Listen, it hasn't been since Christian Bale's Batman that I've had this much fun doing a voice. And the irony is, it's Bane. Am I doing the ratings? I forget. What did we say? Brains? 2.75 brains. It's not Shakespeare, but if you want to turn your brain off for 97 minutes or however long it ran, this is what big dumb movies are supposed to be. 2.75.
J.A.?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's like 2.75 as well. It was fun. I laughed. I loved Tom Hardy in his 2 voices. I thought that's what I came for. The interplay between him and himself for most of the movie. The CGI stuff, I thought, I thought they didn't quite get the symbiote right. It's a little too bubbly, and it's not quite stretchily viscous enough for my taste, I guess. I don't know. It comes off a bit too bubblegummy, but that's just a CGI thing. So you're really there for the interplay between Eddie and Venom the whole time.
I'm going to go a little bit lower. I think I'm going to give it a 2.5. I think. Is it the best? No, it's not anywhere near the best Marvel movie out there, but I don't think it's trying to be.
Nope.
No, it's not, and it is hilarious at times, and so it's a good movie, like the original Venom, to have a couple drinks, and just have a good time with some of your friends. So for that, and unlike some of the other Sony Spider-Man universe movies, like It's Morbin Time and this Madam Web garbage, again, it knows what it is. And everybody involved with the project knows why they're doing it. Again, Sony just wants to keep the rights to Spider-Man, so they want to keep on making these movies. And luckily, Venom is actually a decent enough character, thanks to the Tom Hardy performance, that it can anchor a fairly decent movie. Again, though, I didn't think it was a movie. It didn't feel cinematic in some way. It felt like a television show. It felt very small scale and limited. And even though there are these big stakes, like people climbing up on top of cathedrals and police, trying to get Eddie Brock and this guy killing all these people, you don't really see any of that stuff. Like, it's like small scale, and I don't know, like that's not a movie for me. That's TV. Maybe that's me nitpicking.
Listen, pal, go watch those other Sony Spider-Verse movies outside of the animated ones and see if they gave any shits. This is at least entertaining.
And that's why it still gets a 2.5. The rest of those ones get like somewhere in the ones. They're dregs. They're awful. They're there to keep rights. This one's decent, so I'm glad I watched it. In any case, we've got more Last Comic Shop coming up right after these commercial breaks with our recommendations of other awesome books that you can pick up at your local comic book shop today.
So by saying other awesome stuff, you're suggesting that what we read today was awesome.
Awesome in the fact that it happened and no one stopped it or had the sense to do anything better with it.
LastComicShopPodcast.com is the destination for all things shop. Plan your week with upcoming show schedules, the latest books, recommendations, and chatter from the crew. Subscribe to the show on all major podcasting platforms from one convenient location. Show your support and browse the merch store. T-shirts, tanks, hoodies for the fam, coffee mugs, magnets, totes, and more. Check out exclusive content through the show's YouTube channel and follow the pod on Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads, and others. All this and so much more at www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com. www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com.
Hey, I'm Jeremy Plum, and I'm here with my good friend Dan Bublitz, and I want to talk to you about a new podcast we're doing.
That's right. Welcome to Panel Picks, a new podcast on Tape Deck Media.
We're just two comedians that love comic books a ton, and we want to be your new comic book best friends.
And we release our podcast every Tuesday just in time for New Comic Book Day. We're going to go over everything coming out each week and spotlight our favorite books.
Not only that, Dan, we're going to talk about our favorite old books, we're going to talk about the amazing self-published books that are out there, and we're going to give you all the pop culture news you're going to want.
Panel Picks Podcast is available wherever you get your podcasts, so take us with to your favorite local comic shop.
And let's go on this weird, wacky journey together.
Enough said.
All right, we're back with more of the Last Comic Shop, and it is now time for recommendations. Yes, that time of every single show where if you weren't a fan of Maximum Carnage and or Carnage, there could be Venom. I guess, no, it's the other way around. Here's some other stuff that you might pick up at your local comic book shop instead, or in addition to, or something. And we're going to go ahead and start off with Chad, because I feel like he's got some camp for us in case you didn't have enough of it.
With the two things we're dealing with today, the Venom Let There Be Carnage movie was totally campy and fun and silly when it was good. And even with your villain of Carnage in that one, Carnage and Shriek, their interactions were also a little bit just classic camp villainry. And then it's there to meet the equal but opposite of Spider-Man Maximum Carnage, where that was the opposite of camp. It was just darkness, darkness, darkness. Hey, look, there's some light at the end. Oh, hooray. But I decided to steer into the campy, fun, and wholesome side to counteract that. So I'm going to go with a 6-issue miniseries. This came out in 2019. It was a combination between Archie Comics and DC Comics. It was Archie meets Batman 66. It was a 6-issue miniseries written by Jeff Parker and Michael Barecki, pencils by Dan Parent, and then inks by Jay Bone. So the plot starts with the old Batman 66 villain Siren, who sings her song, and they send it out over the radio dials in Riverdale. And then the Bat villains slowly turn all of the grown-ups a little bit crazy and a little bit malevolent. And then it's up to Archie and the gang to figure out what's going on. And they eventually enlist the help of Batman and his crew. And so Batman sends Robin and Batgirl first to infiltrate Riverdale, and then he shows up, and chaos and calamity and cheeseburgers and everything else ensues. And it's just a fun team-up romp. And so if you need something a little bit more wholesome, this series is worth it for the covers alone. There's so much fun happening in this book, and it's just lighthearted fare. Archie meets Batman 66 from Archie and DC Comics. Check it out.
All right. Well, yeah, I think I'm going to check that out, Chad, because I do dig anytime they do crossovers with the Batman 66 stuff. I like the Batman 66 and Green Hornet crossover. That was a lot of fun. You can always do fun stuff with Archie, right? Like, yeah, why not? Okay.
Damn straight.
Well, one thing that I was going to recommend this week, but I ended up not deciding to do it, was Dark Web, because I read that at the same time as I was reading the Maximum Carnage, and there's a lot of parallels to that, kind of a return to some 90s excess, but I'm not 100% sure whether or not I liked Dark Web or not.
Talk about trying to make fetch happen. They keep trying to do things with Ben Reilly.
So I'm not 100% sure whether or not I like that, so I'm not going to recommend it. I hope some folks out there, though, get out on our social media and tell me what they thought of Dark Web, because I'd be interested to hear what other people's thoughts are. But one book I actually did really like was another miniseries featuring Spider-Man, and it's called Marvel Superheroes Secret Wars Battle World, to celebrate the anniversary of the original Secret Wars series being released by Marvel. Some wonderful folks, Tom DeFalco being one of them, and Pat Olive, who we've interviewed on the last Comic Shop previously, put out a 4-part miniseries, which is kind of like a coda of sorts to the original Marvel Secret Wars series from the 80s. It tells the story of Black Suit Spider-Man getting whisked away by some other Beyonders in the last seconds before everybody's shipped home. And he's put into his own experiment. And as a result of that, they have to test him with certain things. So they give him allies. They give him first the Human Torch. And then they give him folks like Iceman and Falcon and Daredevil, which seems like they're random until you think about the fact that those were the characters in the Wave 2 of the Secret Wars action figure series. And they put him up against folks like Absorbing Man, which wasn't. But the other ones are Hobgoblin and Baron Zemo and Constrictor and Electro, all of which were, again, in that Secret Wars Series 2 and technically Series 3 that they didn't release in America. But long story short, it's like, again, you get an opportunity to see what would happen if they actually continued that comic book series and brought in the characters that they were making new waves of action figures for. But it's still that Secret Wars fun where they just kind of fight, and eventually it leads to like Peter Parker proving yet again that he's one of the greatest human beings of all time, as he saves the rest of the human race by just shouldering that great power and that great responsibility and just being the everyman that we have fallen in love with over the years. So it's really, really good. The art's great by Pat. The writing is classic by Tom DeFalco. And I'm just glad that it used a lot of characters that they made action figures of that weren't in Secret Wars. So,
yeah, that never made sense to me. They had so many characters there that didn't get toys.
J.A.
Okay, I'm going to recommend something that has a lot of what was in Maximum Carnage, but just in a much better setting. So you have Black Suit Spider-Man, and it is, I looked it up, it is actually the symbiote costume Black Suit Spider-Man. This is pre-Venom, post-Secret Wars. You have some crossover appeal. There is some Daredevil shows up to help out. And you have Spider-Man going through sort of a existential crisis, having to deal with the fact that he wants to kill somebody and then ultimately being the better person and saving this person. And I'm talking about the death of Jean DeWolf that took place in Spectacular Spider-Man 107 through 110. And this really explores sort of a darker side of the Spider-Man universe. Peter David, the writer, essentially sets up a serial killer, Sin Eater, murders police captain and close friend of Spider-Man, Jean DeWolf. And Spider-Man has to deal with the pain and the trauma of losing a friend. And so he joins forces with Daredevil to put an end to Sin Eater's reign of terror. And he's pushed to his limit because Sin Eater then targets Betty Brant. And so he ends up nearly beating this guy half to death, but he redeems himself later. He saves Sin Eater from a mob who wants to kill him for killing Jean DeWolf. So it's a groundbreaking entry sort of into the Spider-Man saga, and I think does much better than the entire 14-issue opus that was Maximum Carnage in just 4 issues. So you get, and that's again Peter David writing with great Rich Buckler art.
Yes, that is one of the best Spider-Man storylines of all time, honestly. I actually think it's better than Kraven's Last Hunt, to be honest. I really do like that story. And maybe it's because it's Black Suit Spider-Man. I'll give that in Kraven's Last Hunt is Black Suit Spider-Man anyways. But I like those stories. Plus, again, 4 issues. That is a perfect arc. If you can't tell your story in 4 issues, then you don't need to tell a story. You don't need to give me 16, 20 issues. Tell something in 4. Move on. That's what I say. And we hope that you move on with more episodes of The Last Comic Shop coming up here in the next month, because there are going to be no Marvel books. That's right. The Merry Marvel March Society is over. We probably won't get another Marvel book for some time because, again, if you look at the quotas that I'm trying to keep equal for Chad in his ratings, we've been kind of Marvel heavy thus far in 2024. X-Men and Deadpool and this whole month of ROM and Spider-Man. We hope that you enjoyed it. And we hope that you enjoy it enough to rate, review, and subscribe over at www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com. So you don't miss any of the DC books that we'll be covering in the next couple of weeks, the indie books that we'll be covering in the next couple of weeks. We've got things like Doom Patrol. We've got things like 8 Billion Genies. Great stuff. And then Movie Mayhem right around the corner with our celebration of the 35th anniversary of Batman 89.
35? No.
Yes. Yes.
No.
Yes.
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 Oh. No.
Eat it chronologically.
That's one of those things when you realize we're closer to the 60s than today is closer to the 90s.
Oh, man. Well, if you need to pull yourself out of some existential dread, you could always go to our website. It's www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com. You can find links to all our social media things. We're on the X. We're on Blue Sky. We're on Threads. We've got polls coming back.
Yeah.
We've got Golden Age covers all the time and all that other comic discussion. All that waits for you on the social medias there. Find those on the website. And you can always double back to the website as well to check out the merch. And J.A., what are we merching this week?
Well, we always have T-shirts, coffee mugs, tote bags. This week, a special on symbiote costumes.
Ooh.
Red or black.
He's got a red one. We better run.
Not T-shirts that are cut down to your navel? Jeez. Just an entire V. You just look like Jennifer Lopez just showing
how those
up.
Things, how she must have like painted on or something. I don't know how that
So
costume
much glue.
Yes.
So much glue.
Tape, glue, industrial adhesive. What's that thing that Baron Zemo has? Adhesive X?
Yes.
Well, once you're done with all that tape, just remember, well, we might be the last comic shop podcast. We don't want to be the last comic shop. So we encourage everybody to head out there to your local comic shops. Maybe you want Maximum Carnage, maybe not. But you definitely want to check out things like Marvel Superheroes Secret Wars Battle World, or Archie meets Batman 66, or Spider-Man, The Death of Jean DeWolf. All that and much, much more awaits for you at your local comic shop. And we hope to see you there.
All right. Until next week, I was the host with the most, Andy Larson. I was joined by Chad Smith and J.A. Scott, and we hope that you come back to the Last Comic Shop. Until then, stay safe, stay Spider-Man-y, because he's still the best. He's the flagship character of Marvel, baby.
We've yet to do a definitive Spider-Man story.
We did David's last hunt. And you're saying that Superior Foes of Spider-Man isn't a definitive Spider-Man story? That made me care about Boomerang in ways that I didn't know it could be possible.
That's a good one. We need a red suit Spider-Man story that counts, not like this one. You know, what's good?
What do you suggest?
Death of Gwen Stacy? Some Ross Andrew? That's 2 issues?
Yeah, you always get Master Planner, Craven's Last Hunt, considered some of the best. I reckon Death of Gwen Stacy's got to be up there.
Can we do Captain Stacy too? All the Stacys?
All the Stacys. Murder!
The Last Comic Shop podcast was a 2024 Black Angus production.